In the Bible, Paul explains that everyone has two bodies, a physical body and a spiritual body. Mediums use their spiritual bodies when they act as a communication bridge between the physical and spirit worlds. As a spirit speaks, mediums hear the information using the ears of their spiritual bodies, then repeat the information to other physical people. Mediumship is synonymous with the biblical term gifts of the Spirit. The focus of our show, Making Known the Unknown, is to provide knowledge through the use of Reverend Hewitt's mediumship and Sidney Schwartz's research. The Bible contains the history of psychic events, along with man-made doctrines created by priests centuries ago. This show will explore the untruths which the Bible entrenched into our society. By uncovering these untruths, we encourage people everywhere to think for themselves with a critical mind.
Hello, and welcome to Making Known the Unknown. I'm your host, Tina Tarryk, and with me are my guests, Sidney Schwartz, middle school teacher from Hackensack, New Jersey, and Bible researcher of some 25 plus years. Welcome, Sidney.
Hi, Tina.
And Reverend Carl Hewitt, founder and pastor of Gifts of the Spirit Church here in Chesterfield, Connecticut, and medium. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you.
For those of you viewers out there that may not be familiar with what we do in this show, although you did see the introductory clip, we usually try to tackle a topic or a subject in each show, and we make a connection with Sidney's research and Carl's mediumship and communicating that to our viewers. Tonight's topic, I should say the series of the show, is psychic phenomena in the Bible. So what we're going to do is we're going to explain to you and demonstrate to you some of the things that went on in the Bible that you have probably breezed over or it's been read to you in church perhaps, that you didn't know was actually psychic phenomena. And in that, a subtopic for tonight's show is, are you God-fearing? Interestingly enough, I think we've all heard that expression, God-fearing, and we're going to dive into what does that mean? Where did that come from? Why do we use it? But before we do jump into that, being that it is September 12th, and it is one day past the anniversary, if you will, of a very tragic event in this country, I thought that it would be appropriate to ask Reverend Hewitt to offer to our viewers a couple of things, and this may be tough, and we'll see what we can get through here. Perhaps a little bit of an insight on what he feels September 11th meant to us in terms of a country, a nation, and a culture. And then also an affirmation. And you've probably, if you've seen our shows before, you've seen that Sidney and Carl have both given examples of affirmations which are almost like a meditation and almost like a prayer. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to Carl, ask him to share some thoughts about the September 11th tragedy, and then also to take it from there and offer something to lift up our viewers with some hope, maybe hope with an affirmation.
Well, Tina, the first thing that I have to say about that, and I said this the very day that it happened 2 years ago yesterday, and my question was, where was God? Where was God when these evil people wanted to use the airplanes to take those innocent people with them with all of these other things? I mean, I just couldn't believe this. And I had a lecture, not from anyone on this plane, but from another plane, being a medium and being clairaudient. And by this time, I would think that most of the viewers would know what clairaudient means. It means hearing. Just like in the Bible when we read where it says, and the voice of the Lord came to me and said this, this, and this. Well, this man here would explain what that means, because they called that person that was speaking to them the Lord out of respect. And so the lecture that I got dealing with 9/11 was simply because of the religions on this country and this world. They teach over there, they've been teaching over there the children from the time they're 3 years old, right on up to right on through life, that this country that's between the two big oceans here, America, is Satan's country, and that we're all of Satan, and that we have to be destroyed because that is our, now that's them speaking, this country is their heaven, shall we put it that way. It's their heaven. And in time, we have to destroy all of these people so we can move there. And they have many of their own people living right here in this country, right here in this country. And they're getting ready to do some other big things right now that, and I mean, it frightens me to even think about it. And so my thoughts to the people, whether they know it or not, is to go into an affirmation such as, you've got to go within. There's where God is. God is not up there. And say, Lord God of my being, unto the Father within, come forward and reach out into the universe and invite the ascended masters that have gone on, invite them into our life, that they would help us to overcome this tragedy and to go onward and to help the people open their minds to realize that we are no longer, or should not be any longer, being taught mind control. This is what has messed up the whole world. It's mind control. I hate to say it as an ordained minister, but this is what most of the religions do. It's mind control. And this is why when I asked the question, where was God? This thing has bothered me, and yesterday I didn't even want to see, I tried to turn off the TV yesterday. I just didn't want to go through that again. Because having clairvoyant vision, it was a terrible thing for me to see. And one of my students, I hope I have the time for this, one of my students who lives out in Indiana, I got in touch with him and asked him to go and sit in the presence of this medium that we've been talking about, you know, that where the pictures come, precipitated art. And the picture that he got on his card, and you know darn well they're not even touched by human hands, the picture, you have to look at it closely, and it's like the camera is up here looking straight down, and here's the two towers here. And there's a woman. There's a woman right there. She's in midair with the dress on that she wore on the plane. She was on that plane. And if you look close enough, you can see the cars down on the street between. Looks as if it was done with a camera. And this man who was my student, he was so shook up when he got that picture, he rushed it to me immediately. I don't know if you have it or not. But we have
at the center.
We have it back at the center, back at the church.
Carl, what was the meaning in that card? Did you find out?
Yes, the meaning was Spirit has been doing everything possible to get the people to understand that there is another kingdom that we cannot see. We will all go there, every one of us. But they try to make people think that they have a midway house you have to stop in, or a place called purgatory or something like that. That doesn't exist. That was created by man. It was created by man. And as I said before and said many times, God is within us, not out there in a piece of real estate in the sky. Some people don't like that, don't like to hear that because they're so set in their ways. Well, all I ask the people is to stop and think, how much of your brain is really working? I'm trying to get people to think for themselves. Think for themselves. You got a brain, you got a mind. Think for yourself. Are you allowing other people to lead you? I'm not trying to lead anybody. I'm trying to get people to think for themselves. Ask questions. I've done this all my life. And so I know that God is within. And these religions have taught this. They've taught the people to hate us. There's people right here that hate my guts simply because I do not teach what some of the other churches are teaching. I teach the gifts of the Spirit, which is what Jesus taught himself. He told me to go forward and teach the gifts of the Spirit. Some people Some people think that we sit here with these pictures that somebody here drew for us. These pictures came through the gift of precipitated art. He was right there with his cameras taking the pictures at these events that we had. And when Jesus appeared to me, at first, I wouldn't even accept him because I thought that somebody was pulling my leg. I didn't think I was worthy of this until he proved who he was by coming through with this picture here, because he selected this guy to come into my life. Years ago, I was told about 30 years ago, that a Hebrew, a Jewish man would come through in my life, and he would become a scholar. He would become one of the greatest people dealing with the Bible. But at first, boy, he didn't like me because I shook him up. I got him to think. And he's one of the only students that stayed with me. Others could not let go of their belief system. So you see, he has a knowingness system now, as well as I do.
Thank you very much. I hope that our viewers listen to that. And more than just listen to that, I hope they internalized it. And what you also mentioned is really the key and the core of what this show is about, which is asking people to think for themselves, as if that should be something difficult or unusual, and it really shouldn't.
Very much so. You stop and think of this, Tina. If you ask a physician, how much does the brain really work, and how much is working up there? They will tell you about 10%. Well, my God, ask yourself, what's 90% of it doing there besides growing hair? Why is it not working? It's not working because we have been under the control of mind control. And we've been told that God is out there all the time. God is in here. The soul. When Jesus said to the woman at the well that God is spirit, and over in Corinthians, Jesus has now passed on, and he's using the medium Paul, St. Paul, and he's telling us that we're born with two bodies. We're born with a physical body, we're born with a spiritual body. Right there alone, that tells us that God is within. You understand? That other body. And then when this body is getting ready to pass the other end, in other words, it's dying. In the last few moments of the heart beating, the soul, which is right behind the breastbone, it dislodges itself and it starts moving slowly up, and it comes out the top of the head, that soft spot on a baby's skull. As it moves about 15 inches above the head, the cord that kept it connected to the physical snaps. And the moment it snaps, this person finds himself in a body of energy. They don't look any older than 30 years old. They're in absolute ecstasy. This is why it was called heaven years ago. They see color around everything in the room, but their relatives and whoever's in the room can't see them because their body is energy. They're very confused. They don't know where they are. They think they're dreaming. But somewhere at a little distance, there's a group of people watching very closely. They're watching this new arrival very closely. And when this arrival, after taking inventory of everything in the room and looking at all these lights around everything, they will eventually see the body laying there. They'll go over, look at the body, and almost every one of them will make this expression, "My God, that looks just like me." But that makes them think they're dreaming. And when they do that, that group of people over there starts moving in slowly. And then their eyes focus. This person sees them as their loved ones that passed before they did. And there's a wonderful reunion taking place there. And they escort this person to whatever dimension that they're going to. You see? And you don't go through some judges. You don't go through somebody that said, well, you know, you were a rotten bastard and you're going to go to hell. There's no such thing. There is no hell. And there's no devil. There's been so many things changed in this teaching. And that when you dig far enough, and you do your homework, just like this man here, you'll find out that Jesus only taught the gifts of the Spirit. That's all he taught.
Now, it's funny you would mention something about what happens when we die and reuniting with loved ones when they pass over, because we had a viewer email us with a series of questions, which is really just perfect for tonight's show. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to throw some of those questions out, because I hear these questions all the time. I don't know about the two of you and your friends and what you do during the course of the week, but these are questions that I'm bombarded with all the time. And I think that if that's the case, then many viewers out there would also like to hear some of the answers to these questions. So if you will, I'm going to read a couple of these.
Let me just add one thing here before you
Okay.
go. When Jesus says, in my Father's house are many dimensions, it was the writers that changed that to in my Father's house are many mansions. That is not what he said. In my Father's house there are many dimensions. And dimensions are different levels of frequency. Like yourself, I mean, if you were a teacher, you would go where all the teachers would go. He doesn't want to go there because some of the teachers he don't like. But there is that level. And if you were a musician, you'd go where the musicians go. And an artist, where the artists would go. You see what I mean? These are the different dimensions. But in those days, they didn't know what dimensions were, because this meeting was taking place at the Council of Nicaea in a mansion. And so when they found that tidbit that they brought from Jerusalem, that he said this, well, they changed it. So none of us know what that means. He had to mean a mansion. In my Father's house are many mansions. Horse muffins.
Okay. Thank you. The questions, and I'll read this. This viewer has finished your book, your first book, My First Encounter with an Angel, Revelations of Ancient Wisdom. And of course, I'm not going to say it and not hold the book up, folks. Here it is. And after reading this book, this viewer says, I found it to be really interesting. I do find myself having more questions as a result of it. Maybe you could help me. And I'm going to ask the question, and then I'm going to pause for the answer. And there's probably 2 or 3 really good questions here I think that our viewers would also appreciate having an answer to. And the first one is, are we all predestined to a certain death, or do choices we make along our paths, or life's path, it should say, alter when and how we die? So that's the first question.
Death is just as natural as birth.
Okay.
Just as natural. And everything is recorded that we do from birth to death. Everything is recorded in the soul. The soul is just like a computer, just like a computer. And this is why if a person thinks good thoughts and do good things, that is recorded in the soul. And it makes it natural for the person to continue doing that. If a person is bad and wants to do bad things to people, evil things, that is recorded in the soul. And the soul feeds that through the body, and they carry it through the rest of their life until they decide they want to change. They have to change it. Jesus said in the Bible, it is not what you take in the mouth that's dangerous, it's what comes out of the mouth. Well, he was also talking about thoughts.
Okay.
It records everything.
Correct, sir?
Correct. But
Sidney?
isn't there a school of thought that says that when you're born, that you select a certain time to come into the world, and at the time that you come into the world, your soul knows like when it's supposed to leave, that it's predestined, that,
Yes.
like when you're supposed to leave?
Yeah. Now I'm going to use a time element here.
Okay.
The other world is timeless. We live in a time flow. And when a person dies, they stay approximately now, in that world for 70 years. And after the 70 year, after that period, I hate to use that time of 70 years, but after that period, then they're available if they want to reincarnate, if they know how to choose the parents. If they don't, they could stay there until such time they really want to come back for more knowledge.
Okay.
You see. And then we stay approximately here in the physical body for approximately 70 years, and then we die. Because the old saying is, you live forever. This is true where you believe a religion or not. It's a natural thing, just like the grass out here will die in the winter and it'll come back in the spring. You tell me that there's some man's going to be out there putting his hands over the grass to get it to grow? It's a natural thing to come back.
Okay. Now,
But-
this person was getting into, I think, also paying back karmic debt. I think a lot of people think about that as perhaps some of the unpleasantries that they might be experiencing in this lifetime are relevant to perhaps something they did in another lifetime, or they're experiencing this because there's something that they have to learn. And can they, and are they, in fact, I guess this is multi-part here, are they paying back a debt, number
No.
one? And then number two, can they change and extend their life if they've made better choices?
I don't accept that. From the teachings that I've gotten from over there, they said you do not have to pay back a debt. For
Okay.
instance, if you back in the stove and you burn your behind, you're going to sit on the blister. There's nobody else will do it for you. Like some people say, well, I'll pray that Jesus takes this or does this for me. See, that's the way it is.
Okay. All
If
right.
you do something wrong, you're the one that's going to carry the grief.
Okay.
So there's no such thing as paying the debt.
All right.
Do you think so? They've told. I'm repeating what they told me, but now you're getting so smart.
Well, I was under the impression that you'd have to make up for that by balancing out the scales and experiencing the opposite thing of your action. So in other words, if I mean, that's one school of thought. I don't, you know, that if you murdered someone, you'd come back to it in another life and be murdered yourself. So you would experience what the pain that you committed before. Just like your brother came back to you from the spirit world and asked for your forgiveness because of the bad things he did to you, he needed you to forgive him.
Yeah, but I think, to me, I just think he learned a hard lesson and he doesn't want to do it anymore. I mean, maybe it's the same thing. I don't
Okay.
know. What would you think?
The other piece that I wanted to add to this is I remember in other shows that you had shared with our viewers that when people do pass into the other dimensions, they also have an opportunity there to increase their knowledge.
Oh, yes, they
Yes.
do.
So that when they do come back, if they choose to do
They're a
that,
different person.
they could also be very different too.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Sure.
But I guess the thread that runs through this, so that our viewers would know, is that you are in control of that. Is that true? Of the length of life you're going to have in terms of, and the experiences based on what's been stored in your soul from past lives?
Yeah.
And it's the knowledge, and again, you've always said knowledge is your passport into forever. It's the knowledge that you gain here that helps you there, that helps you back here, back there. I guess that makes sense.
Well,
From what I understand, and you could correct me, is that before you reincarnate, you actually sit down and kind of map out what your life is going, what you want to do in that life, what you want to learn in that life, and also you kind of network over there with whom you're going to be doing it with, because they're going to be reincarnating too. And I know this is a school of thought that even says that when you have a deja vu and you think you've lived something before, is because you have a sudden remembrance of that plan, and it kind of tells you you're in the right spot at the right time.
Okay.
But, you know, I'm not sure that, you know, these are thoughts out there. The different authors and different people come up with different things, and not everything's correct. So I'm not sure what your spirit people have told you about that.
well, there's one thing, the way I understand it, whatever you do, you pay for it some way or another.
Okay.
You pay for
Absolutely.
it. But this is a school. While we're in the physical, this is a school. And what we should learn is the truth here, not hogwash, which is what so many people have. And some of these people are so focused on certain things like you got to get a stone to hang around your neck or something like that, that's got energy in it and all of this.
Okay.
I could tell them to go stick their finger in a socket if they want to feel some energy. And I'm not joking, it's the truth.
These next couple of questions are much quicker, and you've actually overlapped and addressed some of these questions already, but do animals have souls or only humans?
Absolutely, animals have souls.
Okay. This person is also saying that another thing that has been bothering her is that she used to pray a lot, asking for God, Goddess, and guided spirits, angels to watch over her children, keeping them safe and out of harm's way, thanking the God or Goddess for blessings. And she says, now I guess now I'm confused as to what we should do or shouldn't ask for. Who are we asking, thanking, etc.? Who or what is God? And I think you did talk about it a little bit, but if you wanted to address it again.
Jesus said to go in to pray, go into your own closet of prayer. Now, I want the people to understand what that means. The best thing to do is get yourself a pair of blinders so that there's no light playing on those eyes. Get a pair of blinders and sit in a lotus fashion facing north, because there's a certain magnetic pull from the north. Okay. And sit there and visualize that you're sitting in a cocoon of light, which you are. That light is coming from your soul. You're not going to see it if you take the blinders off.
Okay.
But it's there. It's energy. And if you visualize yourself sitting in this cocoon, this is the closet of prayer Jesus was talking about. But they changed what he said. He said, go in your own closet of prayer and pray just knowing, but they changed the writing to pray without ceasing. Now, can you picture somebody that praying forever? When you going to stop to go to the bathroom? When you going to stop to eat? You know, what a stupid thing for them to put in there.
Right, this is true.
So what you do is you focus on the cocoon of light that you're in. And then you say, Lord God of my being, unto the Father within, come forward this moment, this hour, and bring forth the Christ that is within me, and release the enzymes from my brain into my bloodstream, that my body, your temple, be healed. Because the physical body is the greatest temple of God. It is the living temple of the real God. And the God is the God part of you that goes into the other dimension. When you die, you live in this other dimension, in the God body. And then when you reincarnate, you come back, and now the God body is going to live in the flesh body for approximately how many years?
Okay. And the Christ within you,
yes,
doesn't mean that Jesus takes over your body.
No.
What does Christ mean in that context, if you could say that quickly?
Christ is all-knowing. It is, let's say, positive and negative. Negative is usually bad. Positive is very good, loving. Christ is the best side.
Okay, all right.
It also means God man, God woman realizes.
Yeah.
It's when the humanity part unites with the spiritual part, or the soul part. There's a connection there, that you have Christ consciousness.
Thank you. Hopefully that will be something our viewers can take with them and use.
Everybody has that. Everybody. I don't care. Even the worst person that ever lived in prison. The light is around this guy, a person, and if he's closed-minded, then his light is dim, very dim. And if he's a very good, loving, caring person, very spiritual, very open-minded, not a judgmental, his light is way out here.
Okay. This person went on to say, essentially, and I wanted to ask or solicit you for a response to this. She said that, I know, and I must admit that I feel a little ridiculous asking these questions. I just feel like everything I was taught in Sunday school is not what is reality. I feel like I'm learning all over again, and I find it a little unsettling and yet refreshing. I would really like a guide to spirituality for dummies, a lesson plan that I could use for myself and my children who have been exposed to a variety of religious beliefs, and yet I fear have not found one yet. And she says, thank you for responding.
My dream, what I've been told by my brother, that I have to go to North Carolina, and I have to I have to create a temple down there, a healing temple of Yahshua ben Joseph. And that this is a healing temple not only for the physical, but for the this. And the thing is, what bothers me is today the kids are being taught recycled ignorance that was created hundreds or thousands of years ago. It's all recycled. Let me take this, this stuff dealing with yesterday's anniversary, for instance. Let's go back 2 years ago.
Okay.
Those very men that flew, that took over control of those planes that went into the towers, there was a show on 60 Minutes about 25 or 30 years ago. I remember it very well. The Spirit told me to watch it, so I watched it. And this Don Hewitt took his crew, camera crew, with hidden cameras, and they went into Afghanistan. They went into the desert, and they went there where they were having a school of little boys now, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And they were taught this business about the fact that we were all the devils over here, we were Satan people, and everything else. And they were taught all the way through. And those little boys that I saw on this film turned out to be the people in the terrorists in the airplanes that took over control and rammed those planes in those buildings. The same one. Now that's brainwashing. They were controlling those children's minds. This is why I say that a lot of the teachings, and they're not going to hear this on this program, but they're teaching recycled ignorance. It's the same damn thing that's been written down for years. And if the people were smart enough, open their own mind and realize that what we're trying to get across dealing with psychic phenomena, and I hate that word psychic too, they would understand where to go and get answers, because we can prove all of this in the Bible. Psychic phenomena is all the way through the Bible. In fact, he didn't know the first thing about the New Testament until he got involved with me, and now he's left me in the dust. And so this lady that is talking about the children here, I mean, she has a reason to be concerned. But she should teach the children that God is within. And whatever they do good to the other children, to the parents, and everything, when they're good, they do good, and they mind their parents, they're doing God's work, the God that's within them, see?
Okay.
And if they do something bad towards another person, they're doing in the mode of humanity. See, there's two travel here. There's the path of God, and there's a path of humanity. Jesus demonstrated that when he was working on the earth plane. But his students, now these were all young men. The youngest one was 16. The oldest one was 21. That was Peter. James was 16, I think. And they didn't understand what he was saying. All they talked about, but Master, you are the miracle worker. And he was trying to get them to understand there's two paths in life. There is the path of God, there's the path of humanity. And so one day he just shook his head, and he had to figure out some way of demonstrating. So when he went to the marketplace the next day, where all these men coming, making change, gypping the people out of their own money, you know, that type of thing. And so he decided that day he's going to demonstrate humanity versus God. So he went over there and he was talking to these men. He says, what are you doing here with this? You know, you're cheating all these people. You're not giving them the right amount of change. And he got mad at them, and he started turning over their tables. Money was flying everywhere. And everybody that was in the marketplace thought this guy's gone berserk. And so his students, the disciples, they were in the area, and they all backed away. They backed away, pulled the hood over their head, and got out of there because they didn't want to be seen with this lunatic, you know. And so he hid in the crowd, went to the upper room, which was a new place for them to worship, because before that it was always outdoors. And there was a rich widow that gave him that upper room, you know. And so he went there. When all the boys came in at 7 o'clock that evening, there he was sitting in his regular place, so they took their seats around, because they knew, they all sat in the same place. And so it was Thomas that spoke up first and says, Master, what were you trying to do today? You made an ass of yourself. What you did was terrible. He says, I did it to try to get you hardheads to understand there's two paths. There's the path of God. The path of God is when I demonstrate the gifts of the Spirit. Mm-hmm. You call them all these other fancy names, miracles and things like that. But you said, you never saw me get angry. I said, he said, that is the way humanity is. They do things like this. Now, which way are you going through life? Are you going to take the human side, the human path, or are you going to take the godly path? You see? He would do anything to demonstrate. And you're looking at somebody now that I will do anything to get people to open their mind and understand that they've been misled. Because Jesus taught the gifts of the Spirit. And there's no body of the clergy out there that wants to hear that. And they'll argue against it. Well, they don't even know what they're talking about. This man was into it. Why do you think that he appeared to me when there's 900,000 other people out there with a collar?
It's a good question.
Good question is right. I got carried away there, sir.
It's all right.
Give me a chance to talk.
That's okay, because we're actually going into examples of psychic phenomena, and we're going to pull in one of the heavy hitters, I like to call him, Moses.
Oh.
When you talked about bringing the ascended masters closer around people to help them and guide them, we're going to talk about Moses tonight.
Let me insert something here
Okay,
that leads
go ahead.
right into that.
All right.
A lot of people have called me and asked me this and written to me. They want to know who my guides are and everything else. I have Lone Eagle. He was an American Indian, and a Lone Wolf, another American Indian. These people were not involved with any of these religions as man-made on the planet. They knew that there's another dimension we go to. They knew that. And so they've been with me all my life and was connected with me before I came into this incarnation. And I want you to compare that with Jesus, because Jesus had two famous people that were his guides. Go in the Bible, you'll find it out. It was Moses and Elijah. This man, you tell you about this because...
It's Mount of Transfiguration, Luke chapter 9, verse 28.
Wow.
Through 34.
Okay.
Now, this Jesus was doing a healing service one night, not in a temple. He didn't have a temple. He was out in the open. And he had to do all the work in the dark because the priests were looking for him. They wanted to silence him. And so there was a lot of people there moaning and groaning. There was a lot of people in pain, all kind of illnesses there. And he and his students, because he had taught them how to do this, but then he heard a voice, and it was Moses. It told him to go and take Peter, James, and John. Now, out of his 12 students, Peter, James, and John were the only ones that developed to the satisfaction of Jesus and all those masters in the other dimension. And he said, come and we'll tell you where to go. And they told him, he went through the crowd and he whispered to these three young men to follow him. Well, the other boys were very angry, very jealous, because they thought that they were his pets. And so the four of them went up into like an old logging road, further up, and they stopped a little while, and then they weren't talking. And Jesus stopped, he hesitated, but he was checking out the energy. It didn't feel right. He went further up. He was getting away from the crowd down there because they were pumping out all this negative energy, I call it, and he wanted to get away from that. So he went further up, and then he stopped there, and it was perfect. It was nice and quiet and everything else. And he just sat down there, and he waved like his hand this, and the boys sat here opposite him. And they had no idea what he was going to do because they weren't talking.
And I'll pick it up in the Bible. And while he was praying, which means Jesus went into a meditative state, the appearance of his face became different and his clothing became white and gleaming. And behold, two men were talking with him. They were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory, meaning that they were in bright light. And they were speaking of his departure that he was about to accomplish in Jerusalem, in other words, Jesus' death. Now, Peter and his companions had been overcome with sleep, They felt drowsy because so much energy was being pulled from them to make this phenomena happen. This is a gift of materialization, which is one of the things we were planning to talk about tonight. And ectoplasm, which is part of the cells around the body, the outer stiffer portion of each cell, can be withdrawn from the body to form this pillar of cloud. In this case, there were two pillars of clouds, and Moses went into one and Elijah went into another. It's kind of like the Spirit putting on a wetsuit. They put this ectoplasm around their body real tight, so it takes on the form over their spirit body, and physical people who don't have clairvoyant vision will see spirit then. And they can speak, and it becomes just as if a person was standing there.
Okay.
And it came about as these were parting from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 tabernacles. Some Bibles say shelters, some say huts. One Bible even calls it a sukkah, which is what the Hebrew word would have been, which is a small enclosure which is necessary for this type of phenomena. That's why he's asking this question.
Excuse me, let me just add one thing. That is why they have steeples on churches all over the world, because what he's reading right there was what they're talking about.
Okay.
That little cubicle.
Little cubicle that's on top of the church.
Up on top of the church.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
And he can explain the rest of that. Go ahead.
All right.
And it's, let me make one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah, not realizing what he was saying. Well, he very well knew what he was saying, because he knew that he understood psychic science and the phenomena, and understood that you really, it's very rare to do a materialization without it being in a cabinet. It's very, very rare. It continues on and says, and while he was saying this, a cloud formed, that cloud was ectoplasm, and began to overshadow them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud saying, this is my son, my chosen one, listen to him. That cloud of ectoplasm, it formed a voice box out of this ectoplasmic, and they were able to speak these words so that these disciples could hear it with their physical ears, because they didn't have weren't clairaudient, so they were able to hear Spirit's message through here. So here you have 2 gifts of the Spirit which were being demonstrated. The same types of gifts that Moses was able to do when he walked the earth plane, because that's what we plan to talk about today. So
All right. Now, just to clarify this.
Yes.
Students of Jesus's,
Yes.
who went up to the mountain, and Jesus's 2 guides at that time, Elijah and Moses,
Yes.
formed this cloud.
Yes.
And they were able to speak to the students and Jesus through this cloud
Right.
formation. Okay.
Now,
All right.
they explained to me that the reason that this happened, they wanted the students to witness this. Now, let's back up a little bit. Jesus selected 12 students that were capable of developing to be a medium, a prophet in those days. But only 3 of them developed to his satisfaction at that time. See, that's why they were with him. Okay. But Jesus, that is Moses and Elijah in the other dimension, they wanted those 3 students to see this. And they wanted them to eventually develop and each one select another 12 students, another 12 students. And so that eventually, at some time in the future, this was Jesus' dream, that the whole world would understand the gifts of the Spirit. And if they did, we'd have peace on this earth today. We're not going to have any peace on this earth, and he's not coming back. So sometime in this class, I have to tell you what I was taught this week. It's not good.
Okay.
Since we jumped into this, let me jump back into the book of Exodus, chapter
Okay.
33,
All right.
verse 7, where Moses did the same type of gift of materialization.
All right.
And in verse 7 it reads, Now Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, a good distance from the camp, and he called it the tent of meeting. And it came about that everyone who sought the Lord would go out into the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. Some verses say, some Bibles say, the Coverdale Bible says that anyone wanted to ask God a question would come out to this meeting tent. The Knox Bible says anyone who wanted disputes settled would come out to this meeting tent. In other words, what was going to happen was physical people could talk to God and get an answer.
Yeah.
This is what happened. Verse 9 reads, And it came about whenever Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend. The cloud is this ectoplasm. And it would stand at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord would speak with Moses. And verse 11 says, "And the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, just as a man speaks to his friend. Then Moses returned to the camp, but his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent." In this case, it was Joshua who was the medium. Joshua would go into trance, and this ectoplasm would come out. Ectoplasm is part of your cells. It's part of your life force.
It's the life force.
And therefore, since a good portion of it was being used up for this communication, when it was all over with, the rest of the ectoplasm went back into his body, but not all of it, and therefore he'd be very, very tired.
It was exhausted completely.
Now, one of the things we teach is that what happens in biblical times can happen today. And the studio has some pictures that we'd like to show.
Okay.
So if we could bring up the picture of Ethel Parrish, the medium. This medium lived in the 1950s.
Okay.
And she was a materialization medium.
Okay.
And someone came in with infrared photography, if we can have the next picture, and they started to take pictures of the seance. If we can, here it comes.
Oh my goodness, look at that.
You can see Ethel Parrish is sitting in that little curtain tent.
The medium is in that tent.
Is in the cabinet,
Okay.
in the sukkah, in the hut, in the tabernacle,
Okay.
whatever word you want to use.
Yeah.
She's in deep trance.
The woman on the left is not really part of what's needed to happen. She's holding open the cabinet so that you can see the medium is there. If you can see across the face, there's a smoky substance.
Right.
On the right-hand side is the, quote, pillar of cloud that we spoke about with Moses. It's the same cloud that Moses and Elijah used these pillars
Isn't that
to
something?
form.
What happened in the Bible we're looking at right now?
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Next picture, please.
Exactly.
All right.
You can see there's a slight bit of change in
Right,
it. If we could go to the
right.
next one, please.
Oh my goodness, look at it. What is it doing?
Well, if you would notice the pillar of cloud, you're going to start seeing a woman form in this.
All right.
Next picture, please.
Oh my.
The spirit that's forming was known as Silverbell. Next one. She was an Indian god.
Oh
And
my goodness.
You can see the outlines of her clothes. The next one, please. There she's full form. Now, she could speak. She spoke to the people. In fact, this kind of seance happened many different times. And at one time, they were allowed, you're not supposed to touch the ectoplasm, but they made special conditions so that they could. A doctor took the blood pressure of the Silverbell and the blood pressure of the medium. They were different. The heart rates were different.
Okay, wait, hold up. Keep this picture on the screen. I have a couple questions. Now, this was done in the dark. So
Yes.
this is infrared photography.
In other words, you take a picture in the dark, and
Okay.
it's capturing the infrared
Okay.
frequency.
And this woman on the right is someone who's in spirit.
Yes.
And this is what she looks like in the spirit world.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
And
we got to see it. So not just a medium could see this, obviously,
Yes.
if you were there.
Yes, any physical
Anybody
person can
who-
see it.
okay,
yes.
anybody with
This is
spirit
what the spirit would look like if you had clairvoyant vision.
Okay. And then they went one step further and they took the blood pressure.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, in this one seance they were able to do that.
Wow.
There was another time that this lady was placed on one of those great big scales, you know, great big scales with a big dial like
Okay.
this,
All right.
chair and all, and she went into trance. And when the entity materialized like that, the medium's weight went down 35 pounds.
Really?
Yes.
And then when it was all over with and the body withdrew most of this, she had still lost 10 pounds.
Yeah.
She was exhausted.
Evidently, we have one more
There's one more picture,
yet.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what had happened in this picture?
This picture actually, the photographer had to change film between the last two pictures.
Yep, okay.
And she was already starting to dissolve.
All
It
right.
was like starting to fade at this point.
So this was in the 1950s.
Yes.
When this happened.
Either 53 or 57. I never can remember which
And
date
it's very
it is.
well documented, and any one of our viewers can find that
Yeah.
information if they
Yes.
wanted.
Yes.
Okay.
The photographer says, please hold it so I can get this last picture. And the spirit says, you must hurry. My medium is exhausted. And she started dissolving.
And at one point, they had weighed her, and she lost 35 pounds.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is what you're referring to as the pieces
The
of
ectoplasm.
the cells
that
of
were-
her body
Yes.
actually
Well,
left her
it's-
body.
It's outside of her body, just like was
That
on the
must be
picture.
exhausting.
Yeah.
Now I know what Reverend Hewitt here refers to when he's exhausted after he does a reading.
It's
Sure.
terrible.
Okay. And it really can affect your health adversely
Sure.
if
Oh,
you're not careful.
I have handled the funeral for many mediums, close friends of mine, that overdid it and died.
Okay. Wow. So now we've tapped into Moses, who performed materialization.
Just as Jesus did at Mount Transfiguration.
That's one of the many psychic phenomena in the Bible. One of the quick questions I had, and we're going to bring this show to a close shortly, is we understand that psychic means soul and mind for our viewers, okay?
Yeah.
And I guess when I hear phenomena, I think of phenomena as something we don't understand.
Well, I looked it up in the dictionary.
Okay.
And the word phenomenon, which is the singular form, is any occurrence or fact that is directly perceptible, an unusual fact or occurrence. And it comes from a Greek word, and the Greek word means to appear. So what psychic phenomena would be, since psychic is soul and mind, and the phenomena appear, it would be the appearance or manifestation of the soul.
Okay. And it's something unusual.
Yes.
You don't see it all the time.
That's right.
You certainly don't see silver bell all the time.
That's true.
Okay. Very good. That answered that question. That's phenomenal that you got that. Okay. We are going to continue in the next show series, which will be part 2 of Are You God-Fearing? And we will continue with Moses and what Moses is capable of with respect to psychic phenomena. And I'm also hoping to share with our viewers and make a connection with some of the messages and the influences that are out there for children with respect to cartoons and action heroes and so on and so forth. And I'm looking forward to that also in the next show.
Very good idea.
Yes.
Okay. With that, I'm going to wrap up tonight's show. It always goes so fast.
Yes, it does.
And I want our viewers to know that at the end of the show, there will be information as far as a phone number and address. If you have more questions for Sidney or Carl, or if you'd like a copy of their book, My First Encounter with an Angel. And I have been asked to tell you that the books that they have at the church are on an honor system. If you don't have up front first, you can call, ask for a book, they will mail it to you, and they will trust you to pay for it afterwards. And I think that's great. You will definitely learn something here. Also, our email address, making_known at yahoo.com. Sorry about that. And I want to thank Sidney and Carl for another fantastic show.
My pleasure.
And thank our viewers.